This book contains names and stories of First Nations people who have passed on. At times, it also covers issues of a sensitive and traumatic nature. These are voluntarily shared by First Nations AA members active in recovery from alcoholism, using the 12 steps of AA and supporting others to do the same.
Rick's story, the art of keeping it simple. I'm an alcoholic, and this is my story. I was born in 1959 in a country mining town about 150 kilometres west of Sydney into a family of 6, including my mother who raised us alone whilst working jobs to support our family. I was unable to ever meet my father as he had died when I was 5 years old. He suffered from alcoholism and was found dead in the Brisbane River. My grandmother looked after me until I was age 7. She also passed away. Our whole family lived in a 2-bedded cottage near a mine, near a coal wash plant. My whole childhood, we would always have a lot of animals around. We had 9 dogs, 14 cats, 36 chicken, 10 ducks, 5 geese, and a sheep. They used to think it was a dog. When I was around animals, I would always feel comfortable, as they would give me comfort more than people ever would. At the age of 5, I was sent to infant school. I struggled to concentrate as I was always be thinking of external things, including animals at home. This led me not to learn much at school from day dot. As time went on, I would always think about how I would ever make it to primary school. Even worse, how I would ever make it up the hill to high school. It always seemed to be so far out of my reach. At the age of 11, there were certain boys I would look up to. They told me to come down to the Police Instances Boy Club and join the boxing to help my fear that I always felt within me. This was a turning point in my life. As soon as I started boxing, the fear began to go away for that moment. This gave me a massive ego, but a low self-esteem. So began my boxing career, and it all took off from there. I fought in 3 state titles, becoming runner-up in one of them. This was my final state title that I would participate in. That night I came home from the titles at the age of 14. My mother was seeing an Englishman she had met within the town. When I came home, he said to me, "Well done, son, you deserve this." He handed me a drink of Royal Reserve port. After that drink, I felt all that fear had left me and I could go back to that state title and win it. One of the most euphoric feelings of my life. 3 weeks later, I was on a downward spiral from drinking plonk on the weekends when I was supposed to be at the movie theaters with my friends. One Saturday night, my friends had driven me back home in a blackout, and I proceeded to steal my mother's boyfriend's car and drove it around the gully and back onto the main road in the rain. I lost control of the car, put it upside down in the canal. That night, the police arrived on the scene, opening up the back tailgate and pulled me out of the wreck. They then proceeded to ask me what happened. I told the police I was picked up by an escaped prisoner held at knife point and then was told to go for a joyride. This did not happen. From this point onward, I learnt to lie to get my way out of trouble very quickly. This is why I believe that I am a primary alcoholic. I was expelled from school at the age of 14 and 9 months. I hung around people that were twice my age. I was drinking regularly at the pubs at the age of 15. I was working with my boxing trainer at the time, cutting timber in the bush to earn money and drink. I was well known by the police at this point of time. As I was with 2 other blokes older than me, we stole a car in Bathurst and rolled it on the way home. That set me on a spiral of courtrooms and magistrates, all due to my drinking, from offences ranging from car stealing, drunk and disorderly, and offensive behaviour. I was sentenced to a boys' home for 6 months for these offences and labelled an uncontrollable child. I was always looked after in the boys' home by the Indigenous community that was in there. After leaving the boys' home, I then came back into the world of make-believe. By 1987, I was being charged with my 4th DUI and supply of Indian hemp. I sold myself into Bloomfield Orange to help with my court cases. After 1 week in Bloomfield, I was told by a psychiatrist I was a chronic alcoholic with the liver, equivalent to a 70-year-old man. This is my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't ready to give up the only thing in my life that kept me alive and did not understand the meaning of fear. when they would talk about this in AA. I went to 2 more detoxes between 1987 and 1990 and ran away from both. Late in September, I was drinking in my hometown, the local club, and saw an old friend called Frankie. I used to box with his nephews when I was younger. I broke down that night and told him I needed help with my drinking. He said the best thing for me was to get out of this small country town and go to the city. I was living in an empty house with my dog and thought about to head to the city to change my life. That Monday morning, I ended up at the back at the hospital with alcoholic seizures. On the 2nd of October 1990, I got on the train into the big city with nothing else but a change of clothes. I went to a detox in the city the same day and not drink since that day. In those 3 weeks I was in detox, I met a woman that helped me to no end. And Frank came through the promise I could live with him for as long as I wanted if I didn't drink. I believed the clinic. I heard voices in my head that told me, "This is your last choice, you effing idiot." I felt relieved after I heard that voice. It came from somewhere. This was a point of no return for me to stay sober. Frank picked me up on my last night and took me to the basement of RPA Hospital and introduced me a couple of older sober members. He said, "If I'm not around, make sure you beeline to these blokes here." So I commenced my journey of recovery. I lived with Frank for 3 months. After this, I moved to a halfway house in Sydney where I could have my beloved dog Sam, who was able to stay with me. After 4 months, I was given the keys to a meeting in Sydney and became the secretary of a meeting. I was told by Frank there are 2 types of people in AA. He said, "You can't afford just to go to AA, you need to get into the middle." I met a lovely lady 11 months into my sobriety. She said she was impressed with me standing up and sharing at the front of the dog my bulldog terrier. She told me that she was 3 years sober at this point. She handed me her business card. When I was living in the halfway house, a man who was staying there reading a book said, "You should read this." I told him I did not know how to read because I had never been taught. That night I remember the card the lady handed me, so I called her and asked if she'd teach me how to read and write. She told me to meet her at a meeting the next day, and from then on, we started seeing each other. I moved into a house in 1991. 3 years later, we married. From the first 12 months to the 10-year mark of my sobriety, I would usually average between 7 to 10 meetings a week. I was practicing the first step and the third tradition. 5 years into my recovery, I went through the 5th step. This was too much for me. I eventually had to go back to the 3rd step. At this point, I started to believe in a power greater than myself. I believe this has kept me sober to this day, to this current time. In 1996, my son was born, and I was told by my mother-in-law to start attending Al-Anon. It would help me with my marriage and the kids. I walked into my first Al-Anon meeting and with 2 ladies, and everybody had books there and they were doing the steps. That night, they were starting on the 1st step, and this enabled me to learn the steps more in depth. This got me interested in the program to a better level. When I was 10 years sober, my mother was in a nursing home back in my country town. All the family reunited. My brother turned up with some family history to find out our uncle was an Indigenous man. I was always told in my family that we were European gypsies. I asked my mother the question, who really was my father? She replied, "Your father was an Indigenous man." From that day on, I have been on a journey to get in touch with my heritage in this land, my Wiradjuri tribe, and get in touch with elders to seek who I really am. In 1999, my daughter was born. We used to juggle the kids between each other, attending meetings throughout the week and weekend. At this point, we never went to meetings together anymore. From 2002 to 2007, we had an AA party every New Year to support the people that had nowhere to go on this day to keep them away from drinking. That one part of my service program I used to love about being in this fellowship. I started getting fed in from the big book and the steps after 11 years in my recovery. AA to me filled the gap of feeling different to other people, on top of finding my heritage had even helped me more. I was diagnosed with blood cancer after 11 years. I still have it to this day, but it is dormant at the moment. I know that I'm sober because I accept the 1st step in its entirety. An older sober member I used to hang out with, they got sober in 1959 when I was born, got cancer in 2000. He had a great influence on my life, and he taught me the art of keeping it simple. A week before he died, he put his hand out to me and said, "Rick, the reason I've got 44 years of sobriety is because I got the first step right every day. I fell short on the other 11 on every occasion. You guys have to keep this dream alive now." I always received a lot of kindship from the older sober members that had been helping me through this journey. But I was told by my sponsor that we're all human. We all have clay feet. In other words, put your faith in a power greater than yourself and not in people. My biggest supporter throughout this whole journey had been my loving wife, as we've grown up in sobriety grown up together, sober in the midst of AA. I lost my mother when I was 20 years sober. I never felt the urge to drink over that loss. What I do to keep me sober a day at a time, I ask my higher power for the help and thank him at night for keeping me sober for the day.